Well, hello, guys. Welcome to episode 2 of the careers season. Today, we are discussing about something super interesting, which is curveballs in your careers. This is something that Rhea and I are super experts in because considering a year ago, I mean, I say that with a grain of salt because we've taken some questionable, quote unquote, questionable decisions in our careers, and yet we face a mountain of them still.
Yeah.
I remember in Feb of this year, actually, Rhea and I were in Dallas and we were discussing about our next career moves. And she had just quit her job, and I quit my job as well. And Rhea wanted to start her own clothing line, which is Katoy, by the way. And I decided to start my own blog, which is a piece of Apoorva. I moved back home. She decided to take up to speed. And then we hit curveball number one, which is COVID.
Oh God.
I know.
Takes another sip of her wine.
Okay, for context as well, guys, we're video recording this whole thing, and Rhea is drinking her wine, and I'm drinking my chai because that's the situation of time zones at the moment.
Bro, I had a long day.
I mean, I'm gonna get to the juicier bit in like a hot second, but I guess long story short, we've both encountered so many different curveballs in our careers, and to think right now at this point we are venturing out into different things we didn't even anticipate about a couple months ago
Yeah.
is one thing in itself. But also, a little miss someone here is going through a specific curveball that we think is perfect. Oh my god.
I almost spilled my wine after she started to introduce my conundrum, and I was like, oh God, I have to deal with this. I started chugging the wine glass, and then I almost dropped it, in case anyone wants to see that.
Go to our YouTube channel after 21. But I think Rhea's going through this real time, and I think it's a perfect guinea pig situation to highlight this episode. So, Rhea, what are you going through, dude?
I just got really bad butterflies. I feel like a little when you get just the strange stomach butterflies when you like a boy and he comes to talk to you or something like that. That's the feeling I just got. Hence the line. But yeah, I guess I do have a conundrum. Apoorva did a great job of kind of introducing a little bit of the career path or last 6 months, year, whatever you want to call it. But essentially, for me, like she said, I quit my job, started a company, and COVID hit, which was not fun. And unfortunately, really, really, really put me back. And I really went back and forth on whether or not it was the right thing. And there were multiple times when I was like, shit, I shouldn't have just started a company and not had another full-time job on the side, for multiple reasons. One being sometimes it's very stressful just focusing on one thing that has so many different variables. But I went very, very back and forth. But skip to point now. The company is doing great. We are doing better than I could have told you we ever would have 6 months ago, because 6 months ago I actually thought that this was not going to work out. But I also learned through this process that there were multiple times when I realized I wish I was still working a job while doing this, just to do something else to sometimes take my mind off the lows that you encounter in starting a company. And so I had started to actually go back and interview, that type of stuff. And I quickly learned that nobody really wanted to hire someone who was starting their own company. So the first question I kept getting was, well, are you going to leave your company? And the second I said no, I kind of saw the light vanish from someone's eyes. So I very quickly was like, all right, it's fine. I will go full thrust here. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, I'll go back. Started freelancing for a company a few months ago. It just came kind of through an old contact. And essentially on Monday, I got an incredible offer to join them full time in LA.
Exciting stuff. Yeah. But there's always a but.
There's always a but. I currently live in Dallas. I live at home because I don't pay myself a salary while I'm starting the company. But living at home also comes with the fact that I'm working crazy hours. So just to get everything off the ground, I don't have to worry about taking care of myself necessarily 100% of the time. And also there's just like a different support system, but it's definitely a very interesting situation, because it's an incredible offer, but it's moving to a new city. It's figuring out moving to a new city. How am I going to be able to balance everything? Like right now I can balance freelancing almost full time while doing this full time and doing something else, because there's so many other variables that are here, but I just don't know. I'm sure you can hear from my voice. I don't know.
Was gonna say, I'm looking at her video recording right now and she looks so stressed, and she's like, oh my god, I have to factor in all of these decisions before I actually make the decision. And to be fair, this is happening in real time. I kid you not. Like, we will know what decision she makes very soon, but I'm looking at her face and I'm like, everybody listening, I can assure you, Rhea, they're probably like, I feel you, girl. Like, I mean, in
Dude,
their own.
I have a pimple on my face. It looks like a mountain. This mountain was not there like even 24 hours ago.
I mean, I think that goes to show you don't really, again, to everybody like who's listening to this and saying, I don't have a business or whatever, but that's not the point. The point is like, yeah, it's like you could be so settled in one job 6 months in, a year, and have plans of your own. Like, you find some momentum in this job and you think, okay, 6 months to go, I'm going to go to grad school, or a year from now I'm going to switch jobs or whatever, and then boom, something inevitably comes to you and you're just like, whoa, that just threw all my plans down the drain. So
I mean, I guess it, like, things literally just never go to plan. I don't even know if you remember this very clearly, but like a while ago I think we were talking organically and it was like, dude, like, I don't know if I'm making the right decision. I think I'm making the right decision. It was right when you were leaving your last contract. And I also was like, dude, like, I made the decision that I am just not going to see myself in any other job but this for a while.
yeah.
And I'm okay with that. So I had like set my path. I had set my mindset. I knew I'm not going to have a salary for a while. I am going to be fine. Like, I'll just invest everything into this. And now I'm like, oh, well, number one, do you want to move to a new city? Number two, here's a great job with a team that fully supports you having your own company. Number three, like,
what about the other jobs? What about Katoy? What about After 21? What about the 100 other things this little workaholic gal does? But I mean, I was just gonna say, like, this reminds me of you being in an interview and someone says, what's your 5-year plan? That question gives me anxiety, guys. I don't know how many of you can agree or are like, come on, don't be so oblivious about your life. But the 5-year plan question genuinely gets me shit scared, because I'm just like, are you serious? Like, if you've learned nothing from the recent pandemic and how life's changed and adapted in so many different ways. Sorry.
No, good. You're good.
Oh,
sorry. I just started being like, there's no 5-year plan. Yeah. And she was like, oh my God, you're telling me to shut up?
But yeah, like, there's no 5-year plan. Like, it's probably like maybe like a 3-month plan, a short-term plan, and hope that your life changes accordingly. But yeah, I mean, I could even attest to this. Like, again, we go back, I can clearly picture this conversation. Rhea and I are sitting at our pool, like having our little mimosas and chatting about life and being so optimistic. And we still are, by the way. Like, she's having her wine and I'm having my chai. But and we were just like, I'm gonna start a clothing line. And I'm like, I'm gonna quit my job and move back to India and spend time with family. COVID hit. And then I moved back and I got a job from the same company, a contract. And I remember talking to Rhea and I'm like, hey, remember about the break that I was talking to you about? I'm actually going to take this freaking job because
Dude, there was a negative break, like literally a negative break.
No break at all. And now we're starting our own podcast and she's doing this on top of a full-time business. Katoy, by the way, if we haven't mentioned it already. And now she's figuring out another job, like a 2-job thing. Oh God, that's giving me anxiety already.
I mean, I will say, one, I actually really like the 5-year plan thing you just brought up, because it made me be like, okay, well, what is my 5-year plan? And while I don't necessarily have like a year-by-year plan, I have a sense of where I want to be in 5 years. And ironically, I actually think that taking this job gives me that.
Well, that's good. I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of like the point of this, right? Like, you get you get an array of options thrown in front of you, and that's life. Nothing's ever going to be linear, and everything is dynamic and constantly changing. And you have to adapt to it, if anything. Like, you get an opportunity, and if you think that works for you, then you just take it. If you think it doesn't work for you, you don't, and you wait and you put in work for the next opportunity. It just goes to show that nothing in your career is ever linear. And if it is linear, don't trust them. Don't trust
That's a
anybody.
very valid point, actually. I think one thing that people don't really talk about is like the non-linear parts, I think, are what challenge you the most.
Yeah.
So like even when I really think about it, like she spoke a lot about COVID, but for me, when I decided to not go back into corporate, I decided to start a company, and then COVID hit in India. My actually first manufacturer completely fell through. And I mean, the amount of tears is, I could have like filled a pool, but it taught me a lot. It taught me like so much more than I would ever be able to say. And I never would have been able to grow if getting a vendor was that seamless. And I never would have appreciated what I have right now.
Yeah.
If I didn't have that first experience. So curveballs actually kind of make your career.
Yeah. Well, that's the essence of what we want to say. Curveballs make you stronger. It's kind of like a Kelly Clarkson song. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Oh my God.
Hell yeah, curveballs.
Dude.
Anyway, Rhea, going back to your problem at play, what are you thinking? Now you've got the offer on the table. What are you considering? How do you weigh out your options, if that's a better question?
I don't know if anybody or if everyone listening saw this, but at the beginning of quarantine, there was like a TikTok of Kourtney Kardashian that went like a famous song, or went very viral, where she goes, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, I have to go. That's how I feel when you ask me that question.
I don't have TikTok because India banned TikTok. So we're just going to have to rely on Rhea's knowledge and hope that we know what we're doing and hearing.
I think my head is in so many different places. And the most interesting thing is this past year, I moved back to Dallas because, like I think I might have said before, but while starting the company, I'm not paying myself for the first year, at least, or even more, which means I'm living at home and I'm living in Dallas. And it is actually the first time in my life that I am not surrounded majority by people that are in the same industry as me. So it's the first time that I've been exposed to different salary ranges, different lifestyles, different work points, and it's caused me to do a lot of comparing. And I'm not gonna lie, it's made me feel it's made me feel like not great at a lot of points, which has been really hard while doing something very different than everybody else. But even now, it's kind of like some of the first things that comes to my mind. Like, I got my offer, and like I said, it's an incredible offer, but my first thing was like, wow, like everyone is still doing so much better than me.
I think that's the word, right? That comparisons is the word that we're looking for here, because it can be good and it can be bad. Like, if you're someone who's even at a job right now and you're like, a year from now, I'm expecting that career. What are you doing, girl?
I'm pouring myself some more wine. Chill.
I'm just like, I
half a glass.
I think all these curveballs are making Rhea's alcohol system stronger.
Don't tell my parents.
Okay, this is clearly an over 21 episode anyway, our podcast. But point being, I think comparisons are so innate, right? You get an offer on the table and you are going to compare how it's going to pan out in your life. You're going to look at, okay, is the pay going to help? Is moving to another city going to help me? What are my coworkers making? What are my friends making? That's like such a normal thing to think of. But Rhea, I want to know, and for the sake of our listeners as well, how do you convert this comparison into a strength? Because that's one of the tactics to cope and make a decision, right?
I love that you asked me that, because it's actually been a lot of what my time has been spent doing over the past 24 hours. I will say that when I initially got the offer, a part of me didn't feel very good, because the one interesting part about living in Dallas is for the first time in my life, I'm surrounded by people who are not just in my industry. And I see multiple different work styles, multiple different lifestyles, and multiple different salaries all around me. So it's caused me to question a lot of things. And I would say rather than making myself feel inferior, I've been trying to use it, or like negative in terms of comparison, which usually comparison is a bad thing, I feel like. I've been trying to use it to be like, well, what do I see that I want in my life? Or what do I see that's applicable to me reaching what I define as success? And through this process, that has actually really helped me because, one, I immediately was like, oh, well, compared to everyone I'm surrounded by, this isn't that great. But then I thought about it and I was like, no, this is fantastic for my industry.
I mean, switch the comparison from a Debbie Downer to an upper. Like, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. But I also realized that like these people have different aspects of their jobs, their industries, their lifestyles, their salaries, whatever it is, that I found appealing to my 5, 10, 15-year plan of who I want to be as an individual. So I kind of started to make more of a pros and cons list to like look at the company a little bit differently and be like, well, here are my goals. Like I want to always grow my own individual company. And I also, which is Katoy, with like Apoorva said, and I also always want to be able to work on the podcast. Like, what do these people have? What do I see that can help me enable these things? And how do I go around getting that? So instead of taking the comparison into a negative thing, I tried to take it into a very positive way to understand what I want in my life.
She just flipped the switch.
Flip the switch. Oh, that was a TikTok at the beginning of quarantine too.
Oh God, look at me. But I think that's such a good way to talk about comparison. You can be in your career and you could have a curveball where you're just having to decide what is next, and you get an opportunity and you could be sitting at the table saying, okay, my friend in, for example, Mumbai is making so much more, or Bangalore or San Francisco, but for my industry, this is honestly at the highest edge in money. But money aside, what are my priorities? What do I really want? And you couldn't have that all defined, but I'm sure at like 23 or 24, you kind of know where you want your life to head, what your strengths are, what are some things you enjoy. Like, I actually met a friend of mine recently, and he said he moved from Philly to San Diego and he didn't take San Diego, guys, for reference. Philly is a city that's not very expensive, and San Diego is an expensive city, just like LA is a very expensive city. And LA, for those who do not know, is Los Angeles. But I was like, how did you take that move to LA? I mean, sorry, San Diego, without a pay raise? And he was just like, I love being outdoors. I don't care about the money. I need enough money that supplements all my outdoor experiences. So I asked him, what do you do? And he's like, he wakes up, he surfs, he plays tennis, does his work, goes in the evening, back to surfing, gets a drink, goes to sleep. And I was just like, look at that. Like, he's basically prioritized what he wants in his life over just the pay. He prioritized location and lifestyle over anything else. So I'm sure he's sitting there comparing himself to other 100K dudes in San Diego, but he's happier because he has his other priorities that's set in motion.
I mean, I actually really like that you say that, because I think LA does offer a lot of what I want for my optimal lifestyle. So you're right. That is a point of like comparison that I also have to tell myself, like when I'm comparing myself to my friends. Like, this job gives me a new city, a new network, which is amazing also for the company that I'm trying to build. And I mean, more than anything, like a huge point of comparison for me when I'm making almost like this pros cons list of like what makes me want to go for the job, what makes me not want to go for the job, is like my boss and my big boss at this position, if I would take it, are fully aware that I have another company. And have talked to me about it, and have talked to me, like, we have fully talked about how like what I learn working on Katoy can be fully applicable to what I do at work, and how to make those skills transferable. So like, I could get like 50K more if I was in another job, but like, how many bosses and bosses above that are going to be like, you're like transferring the skills, like cool, you're like working your brain.
And I think that's a good way to say that I'll repeat that. And that's a good way to say that curveballs fuel comparisons. And if you flip that comparison into a good comparison, you're able to understand what your priorities are and act accordingly.
Yeah.
But here's another thing I want to ask you, Rhea. Like you just mentioned that you have all these transferable skills to bring to the table. I want to know if someone listening to this is going through a very similar situation where they might need to move to another job, what and how does the negotiating process take place? Like, what do you think? You're at this table, you're talking to your future potential employer. What do you think you did to bring in all or a full version of you that can contribute to the company?
For anyone who's not watching this on YouTube, my eyes just got really big because I was like, oh God. I think that's a really interesting question because, I mean, first of all, I'm still going through my negotiation process in full transparency. I'm also very lucky that which confuses me even more, but they're like a great team to talk through. And actually, my previous coworker who connected me to this company also owns her own business, so they like are very open. But I think one of the things I learned through this process is as you get older and also like through everything we've talked about, figure out your own priorities, negotiations look very different. Like it's not just a salary thing. You have a lot more in your power, and negotiations are actually about how to make sure that you are giving yourself the life you want and setting yourself up for success.
100%. I want to add that like we want to make another episode on negotiating completely, but amen, Bible, whatever you said is yeah, I like just if you're looking at the video, I dropped my elbow because I was like, she said it perfectly.
I'm also very fidgety if you look at the video, which shows you how like nervous I am while talking about this.
Basically, don't look at the video.
But I used a lot of what I learned from comparisons to like understand what I want and like how to negotiate to get myself the life that I need. Like I kind of had to be like, okay, well, this is a great opportunity, but like there's a lot of questions I have, and the questions are more about like one, my value, two, like I need the right resources to set myself up for success. I know because I've been able to freelance with the company. Like I've had weeks where I've worked 40, 50 hours almost with the company, like just freelancing on different projects while still doing pretty big things for Katoy and the podcast. So I know it's possible, but it was more about like, if I'm moving to a new city, like what are the resources I need? And also actually evaluating like what my relationship would be with my boss. So it's kind of like a mixed negotiation, but a lot of that is just looking at the offer. Like for me, one thing that's so important is like, I can't have only a specific days of PTO. I will work at any given point in time. Like I don't care.
This I can attest to.
Yeah, like it's literally like almost 1 o'clock in the morning right now. But like I just need the flexibility though, and that is something so important to me. And actually that's something I didn't even have to negotiate and I experienced firsthand. But to me that was like would have been a very strong point of negotiation, because to further my own personal success further, I need the flexibility. So negotiation is like completely your power to turn the positions or whatever situation you're into to suit you the best for your 5, 10, 13, whatever end of life goal.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have an example to share on this as well, and Rhea doesn't know this yet, but I haven't spoken to you on this. But it's a very similar process. Obviously, here I'm now taking a break from from my past job, and we started this podcast, which I love truly. But I recently received a job offer from an employer here, and they asked me to move from. I live in. Assuming that I'm not going to give you names of which city I live in and which city I'm expected to move to. I'm just going to say Yeah,
What?
because you know what? Like, this is something I've realized, and I am the same too. Indians are so territorial about their cities they're from. So if you dish
Wait, can
another
you message
city,
me? What can tell me where you were supposed to move?
I'm gonna do this after we record.
Okay,
But
fine,
Rhea's gonna have to
fine.
play along, and she's gonna play the patient game. But
I'm not
long
patient.
story short, I live in City A, and this job that was offered is in City B, and it's quite a stretch from here. It is also known to have a not so safe reputation for any person moving in. The pay was okay, but they weren't going to offer me any relocation. And I sat down and I thought, okay, it's not about the pay anymore. It's more about my safety, because the job role in itself requires me to work around the clock, to go on site and do a lot more than I'm expected. So I had to sit down, and like Rhea said, I went through the comparison phase as well. I had to make the pros and cons list to know what are my priorities. And 100% the one thing that stood out was safety. So I remember going back and speaking to the HR person, and I was like, look, I'm not asking you for cash. I'm not asking you for anything. But if you cannot provide me a location or a house in a safe place, a safety car that can drive me up and down in a city that is known to be not safe for a girl especially, and if you're not able to tell me a tentative timeline to work throughout the day, it's going to be really hard for me to make that decision and make that plunge to move to a completely new city. Like, those are my non-negotiables, and you have to figure out a way to craft that. I don't know what the decision is with that job. I am one sec. I lost my train of thought. Okay. I'm gonna start again. Okay. I don't know what the end result of this job is, to be fair, but basically turn that negotiation into something that I needed for my safety. I needed something that they can vouch for in return, and it was not money. And that goes back to Ria's point
Yeah.
about figuring out what your priorities are and fighting for that, because you don't want to be in a job that doesn't give you happiness, or you're constantly worrying about safety and security, you know?
Well, for anyone who watches the video, once again, my mouth just like dropped open for half that story because I didn't know that. But I also really like what you say, because a lot of that is kind of what's going through my head right now. Like, moving to a new city, especially like LA, which where the cost of living is significantly
Oh,
higher.
yeah.
And you know,
Yeah.
it's not New York, but like, or San Francisco, but it is a lot higher than what I'm experiencing right now.
Yeah.
And I think the most interesting part is like she said, when I think of priorities, like, if I wasn't thinking like, okay, well, I'm gonna move somewhere, I'm gonna start a job, I have my own business to run also, as well as like something else on the side that's for fun, but like it's incredible still. I need to have certain things in my surroundings to make sure that like I'm able to put my all into work. I don't want to be worrying about other extra issues.
Variables. Yeah.
And those variables are a part of the negotiation, because like that's what makes me successful. So like I
Yeah.
love what you were saying, because those are all things constantly going through my head.
Yeah. I also want to ask you this, because I think it's very interesting to talk to someone who's got like two different jobs and is considering a third full-time job. But um, how do you strike your piece? Or, you've had all these curveballs thrown at you with this. It's one job to a third person, but for you, it could be like a life-altering decision in many ways. So how do you find your fulfillment when you have so many options
Yeah.
that cloud your judgment?
To be honest, and this kind of goes back to the last episode we spoke about. I think my first takeaway from my previous job was that you don't necessarily want one job to be your complete fulfillment.
Yep.
Because one thing we all learned through COVID, especially, is like life changes pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And through that, kind of that solidified to me that it's almost like having a diversified portfolio financially. Like I also want a diversified fulfillment portfolio.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's a spot on way to analyze
Yeah.
the situation. Yeah.
And honestly, like even in my interview, one of the things, so my experience, for people who don't know, is very fashion based. I went to school for design and merchandising. I tried to be a buyer for a little bit, then I ended up going into brand marketing, but it was all within fashion. And even the reason I didn't love the last part of my previous job is because it went from more fashion intensive to just like more monotonous within the industry, and that's why I didn't like it. So that was always a huge part of my lifestyle. And when I was interviewing, they actually asked me that. And for the first time ever, I was kind of like, actually, I don't care whether or not this job has anything to do with fashion, because I already have something else that I have full power, or like power to myself over, in terms of how my passion affects my life. So it felt a lot more confident to me that I was able to find a different level of fulfillment by having something on the side that gave me that part of the passion. So with that being with that being said, I think what I learned from that situation was like, one job doesn't have to necessarily be able to fulfill you. You can have multiple different avenues where you can split up your time to fulfill you. And I like to take movie stars as the best example, but like movie stars act in movies, they're in PR ads, they do fitness stuff, they sometimes have clothing lines. Like you have multiple projects to fulfill different parts of you.
I think even just like from your story, the one thing that I want to highlight to everybody is that like you're putting so much pressure on one job and hoping that it fulfills all your life goals is absolutely absurd. And that is something we, I guess, on a general level as a society need to work towards, is invest in your side hustles. Look at something you're so passionate about. Like Rhea was always passionate about fashion, and she was very lucky that her interest became her career, and now she's thinking about flipping the switch and changing the ratios around. For me, it was squash. I was an athlete for the longest time, and I can't pursue it professionally, but now I play it recreationally and contribute a lot to the squash community, and I write a lot. I have my own blog, and the podcast is my baby, and all of these can be reconfigured like around, I could potentially get a job as well and then reconfigure where my energy is going towards and what gives me most fulfillment. Like your job can just provide security, it can provide maybe or unlock a whole door of different network for you, but again, like I just want to reiterate to people that if you think your job is your ultimate end, no, fulfillment can be acquired in very many different ways, and that's a really great way to tackle a curveball, like
I mean, I will also say, I think by doing that, what I have personally experienced is like it opens up a different lens of looking at things. So like a lot of what I'm looking at this job with isn't like, oh, it's the perfect job in the world. It's more of like, okay, well, I have other things that fulfill a lot of my interests, but like this job gives me a lot. Like this job gives me a different learning opportunity that nothing else I'm doing gives me. And it gives me a learning opportunity from leaders. It's like a smaller size agency. It gives me an opportunity to see how people manage others. And as someone who has a team for myself, like this is also an incredible opportunity to see how like a lot of back end stuff works. So it ends up being very different. Like if you would have told me a year ago that I was like very intently considering a company more high on the fact that like one, I would be getting different exposure to different types of like marketing and different ideas and challenging myself in different ways and learning like leadership and management and all these things, I would have been like, oh, so what happened to your college degree?
Yeah. I think that's a good way to kind of say that like everything that you do here on, and also I'm gonna just cut this out, but also we want to add that if you are still in the process of figuring out what other things fulfills you, that's fine too. That's the fun of it as well. Yeah, like just because she and I have other things that we like doing, and you're probably, if you're sitting on the couch and thinking, oh my God, like I'm so unproductive. No. That's not what we're trying to communicate. It's more like, here's two of us to tell you that the opportunities are endless, the spectrum is super wide, and you don't have to completely put so much emphasis on a job to tick all the boxes in your life.
Yeah. I really like that you said that, because to be completely honest, I look at people all the time and be like, why aren't I doing more?
That's just, again, that's where the comparison comes in.
Yeah.
You're constantly comparing. It's more like,
Mhm.
how can you learn from the other person, right?
Very valid point. But I will also say that, like, a huge part of that, like she said, is almost like taking the risk to be like, my job is my job to a certain extent. Like, this is what I'm going to learn from it, and this is what makes me passionate about that. The other things that I'm passionate about, here are the, like, how can I find another avenue to fulfill it? And that's kind of how, like, maybe right now you're sitting and you're listening to the podcast and you're like, I've always been interested in like XYZ. Like, this is why half the reason I hate my job. So I'm always like, what if I was doing this instead? Like, how do I find a way to start doing that? I actually have a friend, who long story short, we have known each other since we were 16. We met when we modeled together, and now she's in Dallas with me. She has a completely different career, but she's always kind of gone back and forth on like, I wish I got back into modeling. I don't really know, like, whatever. Now the time has passed. And over the past 6 months, she started doing photo shoots in Dallas. She is now signed with a modeling agency in a different city that has been like trying to get her jobs, has been putting her out there, has like challenged her. She's now put out a poetry book because she just was like, you know what? I need other things to fulfill me. And one by one, she started being like, I think this fulfills this part of me. I think this fulfills this part of me. And it completely takes you from point A to point B.
I think like this is obviously something that is a work in process, and you gotta experiment as much as you can. That's what your entire life is about. But more importantly, I hope through this episode you kind of get a scoop of how, Rhea's got a big decision to make. She's got big decisions to make, but also
Comes more wine.
Yeah. Look, it can be a good decision or it could be a wrong decision, but at least you made a decision and moved forward with it, right? Like, so we're super, super happy that one of us is actually going through something real time, even though she's chugging wine and is probably growing different pimples all across her face.
How mean? There's only one.
Okay, Rhea. So I think all of us want to know, the people want to know what Rhea's decision is. Because, let's be honest, we put them through a ride with this episode. So please, madam, spill the tea.
Honestly, I have no idea. And I probably have to tell them tomorrow. I don't know, to short answer, but I do think that the 4 takeaways that we covered here are helping me kind of frame my thought process a little bit more. Like, the first takeaway really being like, your career path isn't linear, helps me feel more at peace with the fact that like this isn't like a very stressful thing. Like, it's fine, it happened, now I have to figure out how to deal with it.
Yep. Number 2, which probably will help, which she's already done this, we've already spoken about this, but number 2, I'm sure you know that flipping the switch on comparison and using that to your strength by doing pros and cons, I'm 100% sure that that's going to help you get to your decision closer.
100%. And like you said, taking the positives and then actually going into takeaway 3, like using those positives from the comparison to work with my negotiations, which I've still been doing. I kind of have even better of a thought frame after this. So kind of going back and forth on that, but it also going into the 4th takeaway, which was like your career fulfillment. Like, even after talking through this with you, it makes me realize that like I feel fulfilled and this job gives me different avenues to even fulfill myself further. So lots of questions in my head. But
I think this is a great example for people. We want to show you through this episode. Obviously, she has a curveball, you may have a curveball. This is a way we like to approach things when we deal with curveballs, and I hope that you can incorporate this in your life as well.
Yeah. I mean, I do also want to say, I think this was like pretty niche because we talked about it, very applicable to my situation. But like, dude, if I had a corporate job and another corporate job came up and I was up for a promotion or whatever it
You do
was,
the
like,
same thing though.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I think this is really like the four takeaways were kind of almost like a recipe for success while figuring out how to understand what you want most.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that, you guys, I'm gonna give Rhea a call tomorrow to know what her decision is, and we're
Ugh.
gonna hopefully let you all know in on this little secret. But thank you, Rhea, for your cup of tea and for your insight on the situation. I also want all of our listeners to feel hopefully empowered, hopefully a little less stressed. I hope you're not drinking too much wine and stressing out about all the big decisions that we need to make.
Guys, send me good vibes so that I like figure out what to do, and so the one pimple on my face goes away.
But thanks again, everybody. Our conversation on careers is going to continue over this month, except we're going to spin on it. I'm sure you've already noticed the spins on the episodes that we've been releasing lately, but we're going to have two guest episodes featured this season because there's just so many people who have a wealth of information that we think will get to you guys even more better. Yeah, make sure to stick around and we're going to come to you hot every hump day.
Bye, guys.